Well, hello. My name is Daniel Palacio, and I'm the Assistant Director of Career Services at Columbia College. And we have a full-scale internship program. We work with students in over 35 different majors, from criminal justice to business to human services, helping them find internship placements both in Columbia and then wherever they're from as well. So what I'm going to talk about, though, is some of the legal aspects. Very exciting part of internships. What I'm going to try to cover is dive into the pay issue a bit more. I know it's kind of a big issue for a lot of folks. Talk about some other areas like workers' comp, and also what it means to hire an international student. So let me frame the question of pay with a lawsuit. In September 2011, two former interns that worked with Fox Searchlight Pictures on the movie Black Swan. You remember that movie? They worked with the movie studio as interns, as unpaid interns. And then a few months after completing the internship, they turned around and sued the company, saying that they should have been compensated for the work they did. Now, the work they were doing is what we think when we think of old school internships, which is a lot of doing laundry, getting the producers coffee, cleaning up the set. Not things anyone in this room would ask their intern to do, but things that definitely still happen in some of what I would call the glamour industries of sports and entertainment and fashion. Really meant to be the very first one on the ladder. So these students disagreed with that and felt like a movie that made $300 million, they were entitled to some of that compensation. And they found a law firm that is very sympathetic, like I said, about their plight, and so has spawned off litigation. So that started September 2011 and it's still ongoing. The case has not been resolved. When it does get resolved, I think it will set into, whichever way, it might set into a chain of motions. Fox Searchlight Pictures has thus stopped having unpaid interns. They now pay all their interns $10 an hour, but I think they have less interns than they did. So I'll use that as kind of the framework. So how does this involve you? When we talk internships, there's a lot of talk in internship coordinating circles, and there's been a lot of articles in like the New York Times decrying the use of unpaid internships, and this is mainly in for-profit. Nonprofit and governmental is a little bit different of a story. They talk a lot that unpaid internships really have no place. They de-level the playing field. They are taking away jobs that otherwise would be paid. But regardless of your opinion, the question really is, can you have an unpaid intern? Is it legal to have an unpaid intern as a for-profit company? Well, there's two ways you can classify an intern. If you pay an intern, that student is probably classified as a temporary employee, whether full-time or part-time. And they'll be covered as any other employer would be covered in every area. So paid interns are usually not an issue. They're going to be okay, they're going to be covered, and the way they're classified is good. It's if you're a for-profit and you have an unpaid internship. They are then classified as a trainee, and the federal government has classified trainees. We may need to lower the lights again to see these. In 2007, the Department of Labor came down with criteria on what can be a unpaid trainee, and they have to follow these 7 rules. They're tricky. First of all, the training has to be similar to what would be given in a vocational school. 2, the training is for the benefit of the trainee. 3, can't displace any current employees. 4, the employer derives no benefit from the trainee's work. 5, not entitled to a job upon completion. And 6, not entitled to wages. So most of these are somewhat straightforward, but the one that has really tripped up a lot of career services and a lot of folks is that the employer derives no benefits from the interns or the trainee's work. Well, as you heard from other panelists, the whole point of having an intern is to help you with your work. So that's caused a lot of consternation. This is what the 2011 lawsuit that Fox Searchlight Pictures was based on. The unpaid interns were saying they certainly did get a benefit from our work. We did all these chores for them. We probably displaced a worker, somebody that would have been paid. So this is ongoing. Now, the important thing before this scares off a lot of folks is to know it hasn't been tried in court yet. I mean, this process is still ongoing, and we are expecting more distinct definitions of what it means to have an internship. Because this is essentially a much older definition of internships that has more to do with the trades, when people would become a trainee to become an HVAC or to work in plumbing or something. They would really do like a job shadowing program, which is really what this talks about. But now the definition of internship and the way we use internships in business and today is much different than how it was used back then. So this is hopefully going to be a further evolving process. Now, it's important to know that this is not applicable, as I said earlier, to nonprofits or governmental offices. The key reason is because nonprofits can classify an intern as a volunteer. And when you classify someone as a volunteer and you are a governmental office or nonprofit, those students are covered. You can have those. For-profits cannot have volunteers, which is why it's very difficult to have an unpaid intern. They can't classify someone as a volunteer. So, like I said, this is still very much ongoing. So, it's mainly coming out of one law firm in New Jersey that's starting to take on a lot of sort of the bigger companies, and we'll see how it filters down and starts impacting smaller areas. Some folks have asked about other classifications. I talked about volunteer. Some folks also ask whether a student can be an independent contractor. And the way independent contractors are described is that they cannot be an independent contractor because an employer exercises control over the result to be accomplished and the manner by which the result is achieved. So, since the employer is the one that determines that, they cannot be classified, students cannot be classified as an independent contractor. So really your choices are, as a for-profit business, is again, either to pay the student or to try to follow the set-up criteria that the Department of Labor set up, which is difficult. So how can you protect yourself? Again, pay, we heard some really good examples of some of the local rates and different ways that you can pay, either using a stipend plus wages plus other areas. There's been some very creative ways folks have used to compensate interns. Some folks have, there's an example of a real estate company that offers to pay the licensing fees and to get that student license upon completion of the internship. There's another place that's basically a venue where folks do events that will offer a free event to the student upon completion of the internship. So there's some interesting ways that you can compensate the student as well. Secondly, I really encourage folks to work with career services. One thing about the Fox Searchlight Pictures lawsuit is that those students were not involved in an accredited program. In other words, they were at post-graduation just taking on the internship to get their foot in the door into the entertainment industry. They were not getting credit for their internship and couldn't have gotten credit for their internship. So I really encourage companies and nonprofits, organizations to work with career services here in the local area to help us find students, because the students we're going to work with are usually the ones looking for credit. And when they're connected with credit, that's also, it doesn't count as compensation, but it is a way that the student's going to stay involved and help work with the company. So another question is, I don't think I actually made a slide about this yet. No, is unemployment. Are interns entitled to unemployment compensation? Well, generally no, for a few reasons. One, eligibility for unemployment is based on availability to work. Most interns are returning to school, so therefore they're automatically ineligible. Two, if the student and organization typically agree to a finite time of the internship. In other words, when you're hiring the intern, there's an end date in sight, whether it's the end of the summer, the end of the semester. That also makes them ineligible for unemployment. And then finally, most states have an exemption for educationally based work experiences, which interns fall under. Another question that some employers have asked, are they liable if a student is hurt on the job? And it's a complex issue and there's no one definite answer. Generally, if the intern is on the payroll, that student is going to be covered by the employer's normal workers' compensation policy, just like all other regular employees. If the intern is unpaid and earning academic credit for the internship, student is usually going to be covered under their student policy. Another good reason to pursue students looking for academic credit. It is highly advised, though, if you're a governmental office or a nonprofit and you feel like you're going to be using a lot of unpaid interns, to have a volunteer writer on your insurance class. A lot of times that's going to help cover a number of as this would prevent students from suing an employer for negligence with unlimited damages. So in most cases, the courts look for employer negligence as the basis for any claims. So you're trying your best to mitigate that. All right. So a few more best practices, some of which you've already heard today. So when you are hiring an intern, it is good to set up the dates of that internship. And I talk with students about this. I think it's important for students and it's important for the employer. Come up with both the start and end date. It's a little disappointing to talk about when the internship's going to end, just as they're getting started, but I think it's important to show that it's a finite amount of time. Do discuss in advance any compensation, their organizational and reporting relationships, their principal duties, working conditions, making sure they have all the necessary jobs, and you would treat them, making sure they have a safe workplace as you would any other employer. Any confidentiality needs on the part of you and the student is very important, and any other expectations you have. Making sure those are all discussed, and preferably in a job description too, so it's all laid out in advance before any agreement's made with the student. All right. Well, let me switch topics. So that's very fun, exciting talk about legal issues with internships. And I'm certainly no lawyer, so this is all just research we've done. Let me switch total topics here and talk a bit about international students. So if you walk around Columbia, you will notice that all of our schools attract a number of international students that come to the States to work or to go to school. And many of these students who are typically very ambitious, very bright, want to get involved with the local work enforcement. Whether they want to stay here after graduation or not, they want to do internships, they want to get experience in their field. And that's part of their experience in the United States. Typically, these students, because they're taking very high-level higher education classes, have a very good grasp of English and are usually ready to really go out there and work. So why would you hire an international student? Well, in many ways, these students can add a lot to your organization. Of course, they bring fluency skills, they bring new ideas, creative ideas, different points of view. They have cultural abilities and cultural linguistics, not only just the language, but their understanding of multiple cultures. They can reach out to new audiences for you. So there's a lot of value to bringing on an international student. The question is, are they eligible to do an internship? A lot of folks get scared off when they hear, well, I'm going to be dealing with immigration, and there's going to be a lot of other issues surrounding it. The good news is when a student is here, they're here on an F1 visa, which allows them to be a student to study either an associate's or a 2 or 4 year degree program. This allows a student to work in their field with something called CPT, curricular practical training. And I'm only going to talk about while they're in school. After school is a little bit different of an issue, and I can talk to anybody one-on-one about that. But while they're in school, once they've been here for 9 months, which is essentially one academic year, and if they're in good academic standing, they're eligible for something called curricular practical training, or CPT. This allows them to work off campus in a compensated position, as long as it somehow relates to their field. Now that's interpreted in different areas, different ways. Generally I consider it, so if Adam here was from the UK and he was a criminal justice major, he couldn't be a waiter at a local restaurant in a paid position. That's not really attached to his field of study or his planned career. He could work at a boys and girls, like Girls Town, that works with juvenile detention agencies and work with that population. That would be okay. They can work up to 20 hours during the school year while school's in session, and they can work essentially unlimited hours, anything over 20 when school's not in session. So during the summers, they have no limitations on their number of hours. There's no extra paperwork. Now, it depends on the school. In Columbia College, is the only one I can speak to, there's no extra paperwork on the side of the employer and no extra costs for either the student or the employer. So they are as eligible as any other student, and they can work. There's a form we make them fill out and some extra paperwork they have to do. But for the employer, you really wouldn't know the difference. We just need proof of employment. So if you send an offer letter, you can even just call or email me and say we've hired so-and-so. That counts. So they cannot work until they get appropriate form. Usually what happens is they go pursue the position. If you hire them, they come to us, fill out the form, and in 2 or 3 days, they get the appropriate visa and they can start working. So I really encourage you, if you do see international students or that's something you'd like to consider, just know that while they're in school, it's very simple and there's no additional cost to bring on an international student, either during the school year or the summer.